So let's go ahead and get started. I believe that we have our slides up, Zach, and I'm assuming that we are on the first slide. Is that right? Okay, great. Maybe if we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. There's a lot that we want to review with you all today. We're going to start off with introducing you to a number of members of the contributor program team. We want to spend a little bit of time reviewing why we're having this contributor program and what our goals are. We wanted to then move into a recap of our inaugural season, talk about what we've learned thus far, and talk about moving into our next phase. We then have fielded a number of questions from you all in the weeks prior to this event, and we wanted to open the floor also for a Q&A session, but most importantly, help you all understand how you can get engaged going forward. And so if we can go to the next slide. So who are the community governance team? So we've been talking a lot about the contributor program, and underneath that contributor program, we all have a longer term intention to build out the community governance process. And the initial group that has worked to build out some of this structure, and you're going to hear a lot from today, are this group called Town Builders, who we've talked about in the past. I am the host for today, but I wear a couple of hats. I wear a hat as the Axie Infinity Community Lead, but I've also been asked by the initial Town Builders to become a Town Builder myself. And you'll see names of others who you're going to be hearing from. Hopefully many of these, or if all of these folks are familiar to you all. If you could flip to the next slide. In addition, we have a collection of community members who were responsible for reviewing the many great applications to participate in the Season 0 election process. Some of those have stayed on and have brought in a much larger number of electors who, as we anticipate this initiative growing, we're going to have a growing need for more electors to engage. And so I'd like to also warmly welcome a number of other people who are in the audience who have been chosen to be electors for this next phase. Next slide. And last but certainly not least, there have been a number of people who have helped this process up to this date. And many of them are listed here. And there are a number of others who have helped in indirect ways, but we've had a lot of people contributing to this effort up to this point and supporting both the Town Builders and the electors. If you could flip to the next slide. So what have all these people been doing? Well, in short, we believe that our mission within this program is to collaboratively create the foundations for Axie governance. And we're going to spend a lot of time during this conversation talking about what do we mean by Axie governance. But you'll notice that it says Mission V1. We have worked as a smaller team to start building out some of the framework on which we can build consensus. But we hope that over time, this mission and vision statement, which I'm going to get to in a second, becomes something that we all have input into. And so if we need to make revisions to this over time, the community will have an opportunity to give input into that. Next slide. While our mission is to collaboratively create the foundations for Axie governance, our vision is that by the end of this process, we'll have an enacted governance for our entire Axie Infinity ecosystem. And at the end of the day, the reason that's important is that I think we all aspire for Axie Infinity to be this infinite gaming and entertainment ecosystem. And that only happens through all of us working collectively to build that out together. While we've made a lot of significant progress with that, and I hope people are starting to see the fruits of that labor, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And there are a number of people, many of which who are on this meeting and who are our peers around us, have made all kinds of important contributions. We need to do a better job of recognizing that, further empowering that, and basically enabling people to do more that is really what is at the center of all of this, and I think one of the keys to the success of our initiative. If you could flip to the next slide. You know, as I said, what we're trying to do through this process of establishing governance is really creating a shared framework for decision making. And we think that that happens by helping community members like yourself be inspired to engage that process, to engage in helping make Axie Infinity the best gaming ecosystem in the world. But more importantly, by aligning people's various ideas and expectations so that we can all co-create. Everyone can have ideas, but we can actually affect collective action by aligning all of our various perspectives into a way forward. And so we believe that by identifying those who are most committed, most talented, and most involved and aware about our initiative, those are the people that are going to probably have the most meaningful input to give and are going to help us move forward in the most expedient way. And so our experience, our collective experience as town builders, is that when we work together and we act, that enables scale and it makes us more resilient. And I think at the end of the day, the goal of all of this work is to continue to grow out this ecosystem. And so that's what we're trying to do. The contributor program and the season 0 was our pre-preparation for that work. And if we flip to the next slide, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Akil, who I believe is on the line, maybe so that he can do a brief review of some facts and some data around season 0. Akil, do you want to take it over from me here?
Sure. Hey, thanks. I appreciate that. So, yes, let's talk about season 0 and the different phases that we enacted to get the most out of it. So, firstly, an incredible amount of effort was coordinated across working groups from the community in Sky Mavis, and that effort led to this establishment of the electors and the creation of this contributor role. And after that role was instated, it was really important for us to understand, for the community to understand, who Lunacia's contributors are, what shapes and forms these contributions come in, and where in the world are we in this digital nation. After that, we engaged in public discourse on the Discord, where there was spirited and passionate discussions carried out, and eventually a framework was established to handle how to move forward with proposals and different conventions for that. Finally, the town builders were able to arrive to consensus on phase 1 based on the learnings of the previous 4 phases. And then lastly, coordinate a plan with Axie Infinity and Sky Mavis team members to identify touch points as well. Next slide, please. So here are some facts and figures that we would like to highlight
to the group. Namely that, what we see here on the left-hand side is the growth of the number of organizers, particularly from 5 to 9 town builders since season 0 to season 1. And then you see the same trend for the number of electors from 9 to 19. Now, the reason for this was because the town builders felt that we needed to have a larger representation from across the world and diversity amongst its members, as well as feel like we can all contribute in a meaningful and a consistent way without being burned out, essentially. And it was good to have a large amount of support from our neighbors to be able to achieve our ambitious goals. And on the right here, we see that we had over 750 nominated contributors, with 623 ended up being elected, and 528 today still have that Discord role. Lastly, 18 proposals were put through the frameworks that were established, and we were left with one proto proposal that Beranar will speak to more now.
Well, hello everybody. Beranar here, and Beranar and Freak. Freak is going to join me in this next little group of slides. So here we have the Lunacian flag. So pretty exciting development that we were able to get through a proposal and so grateful for everybody who was involved through that process. It ended up being something that we learned a lot from. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it is very exciting to have an iconic flag that we all can, rally around and that we can use as part of Axie Infinity and our community. So very exciting stuff. And we learned a lot through the process of having this flag go forward. And we'll talk about like that a little bit more, like I said. So let's go ahead to the next slide. All right, so some of the things that we learned, and Akil kind of mentioned some of these things in just the recap, but we really did learn a lot, and these things take some time to really process and understand. So first of all, we learned that execution really matters. So we did implement the contributors program. It happened. It is continuing to happen, and we're going to move forward. Freak, did you have some thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the contributors program was implemented, but it was due in large part to the hard work of our contributor electors. So this was that small group of people that helped us review the applications to become a contributor. It was, in my opinion, a long, arduous manual process. So you saw in the previous slide, there were 750 submissions, and these contributor electors had to actually manually review the applicants' various social feeds and determine if they were in good standing. So there's a lot of manual work there. And of course, some of those criteria were subjective, and they had to kind of have discussions amongst themselves when things were not clear. So I think going forward, we want to automate a lot of this to help streamline the process and reduce the work for these contributor electors. And for season one, as you previously mentioned, or phase one, we've already brought on several more people to help improve the process. So we're just trying to move things along and make things easier for people and improve as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing we learned is that sometimes putting things into action helps us to gauge what's missing, really get a sense of what is needed to move forward. And this was one of those instances that, we couldn't have learned that had we not gone through the process of actually implementing this program and getting it started. Next, we learned that wisdom and coordination are very important. Well-designed systems take time, and consensus really needs to be reached on even the most basic principles within the program and for governance.
Yeah, so having established the contributor program, we understand there's still a lot to do. And although it'd be nice to kind of fast forward to full-fledged governance, we still need to establish a strong base for governance first before we move on. So we're still learning what works and what doesn't work, and even how to coordinate tasks with Sky Mavis. So like, for example, when the contributors program started, the town builders kind of promised NFT badges to contributors, and we haven't yet delivered on that yet. So we're still working with Sky Mavis to make that happen. And even today, we think the badges will be out any day now. I think we have a slide on it after this. But this is something going forward, we're going to learn how to execute more smoothly and execute on the promises that we make. So we're going to take what we learned from season 0 and refine our processes. And
yeah,
also,
absolutely.
Yeah, just one more thing to give some more insight to some of our processes. I think we as town builders also struggled to kind of move forward at times. And so we had periods of stagnation where we tried to understand, we were really just like, this is new for all of us, right? So we were trying to understand what our goals were and how to achieve them. And we actually needed to have several meetings to understand and affirm the direction that we wanted to go as a group. And we also felt like we had to understand Sky Mavis's position on governance and also see their commitment and action. So we kind of have like a rough patch here and there, but things seem to be humming along quite well now. And I think things are going quite well now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was on one of the slides that Akil talked about, having the secretariat group come in, getting a lot of support, and thanks to Syntax coordinating that, we're learning a lot about how to coordinate, and that has been really, really helpful. One of the things that we've talked about is that really having some basic understandings among the contributors just on fundamental things, fundamental concepts, is going to help us springboard into the future. And so that was one of the big things that we're looking at as we move forward into phase one. Consensus and information. We learned that we've got to get good feedback, and participation comes with challenges, but we need to understand the contributors, understand what's important to them, the things that they care about. And the forums helped a lot with this organization. We were kind of struggling at first, but as we were able to kind of create different forum areas so that we could have discussions, that helped us target discussions.
Yeah, I think definitely. So if you guys remember, in the first couple months of the contributor program, we actually asked some questions and asked for feedback from the contributors about what their expectations and desires were for Axie governance. And we learned that the contributors basically had a broad set of interests, right, in all different kind of governance topics, from like treasury access to Axie score, to game balancing, and even like branding potentially. So we wanted to capture all of that contributor feedback somewhere in a more structured, organized way. So we rolled out the Discord forums, and like Berner said, it's a place where we can have more topical discussions and capture some of that history of discussion. So yeah, if you guys haven't checked out the governance forums, I encourage everyone to do so.
Yeah, and as part of that process, we did get some good data early on with some surveys and so forth, but we noticed over time that interest kind of lagged, and participation did as well. And that's partially because, season 0, we were trying to sort things out. We were trying to figure out how, honestly, we kind of put it in place to see how contributors would play in the system, and what type of game we had set up. And so we learned a lot, but we also have learned that we need to have better systems to get information and kind of gauge interest from people to keep the process going and moving forward. We learned through the process that prototyping helps. Everyone involved learned a lot from the proposals. The flag proposal yielded the most learning, but the method for proposals was unclear and somewhat chaotic. And I'll just mention before you go, Freak, that we saw that those things could become, multi-headed beasts, big monsters that we were not, we had 5 to 7 to eventually now 9 of us. And trying to fill that within the group of just town builders was obviously impractical.
Yeah. So one of the things that came from the Discord forums was like the series of proposals from the community, tons of them, right? And we thought it was great that the contributors wanted to act, and we as town builders wanted to kind of test the waters and see what would happen if we helped push through a test proposal. But we knew we were kind of immature, not mature enough yet to have actual council. So we wanted to experiment with like a small committee. So we kind of helped JJ establish that small committee in lieu of a council to kind of push his proposal through. It took a while. I think it wasn't the smoothest process, but we were able to eventually select an artist and choose a winning design through group consensus. And in my opinion, I think helping groups get started and figure out how to operate as a group is one of the most important lessons learned from those kind of experiments. So helping groups recognize what they need in order to establish structure and processes that should allow them to get down to business more efficiently. That's something we want to carry over into future projects where we have like decentralized decision making, things like that. So a common theme that we've seen arise in decentralized decision making is that people often don't want to make a unilateral decision because they don't want to step on other people's toes, right? They kind of want to build together. But sometimes that leads to decision paralysis where like the process stalls out and doesn't move forward. So sometimes I think it's good to have someone to make an executive decision, or perhaps before we get started in the process early on, create some decision-making criteria and establish that early on so that we know basically how to move through the process more smoothly. Yeah. And of course, we'll try to bring that with us into phase one.
Yeah. And so the next slide, maturity is crucial. We've kind of talked about that one. The program is not yet ready to access and govern, for example, the treasury. That is the goal. The complete governance of the entire Axie Infinity universe is the goal, something that needs to be worked on together within the contributors program and Sky Mavis together hand in hand. But we're not there yet. And so we're taking action step by step to get to the place where the governance is in a mature spot to handle those sorts of really weighty issues.
Right. So having gone through the flag proposal, we recognize we're not mature enough yet. As town builders, we recognize that we're not a governing body, right? So we're not here to make decisions necessarily, governing decisions, and we don't want to be in that position to decide which proposals have merit and which ones should be acted upon. Ideally, we'd have an elected governing body that engages with the community to build out a proper system for community proposals, and that's what we hope to get started in phase 1.
Yep, exactly. To create those kind of basic institutional designs that we can build from and that we can actually have processes and systems in place to have that happen. We need to have good systems for contributor self-review. The program needs to be a living, dynamic, and it needs to be able to both react and be proactive with issues and problems that may arise.
So internally as town builders, we've been reviewing a set of like governance principles and to potentially incorporate into some foundational documents, but this is something that we want to build with the community, and we want to use that to define what Axie governance means. We know the contributors are eager to provide input and move governance along, and so this is going to obviously it's going to be an ongoing process where we'll adjust our ideas and processes and adapt to the community as basically adapting to what the community wants and needs.
Absolutely. And so also we figured out that there are lots of technicalities that need to be addressed. So we have to handle programs like how is the Axie IP going to be handled, and how is that going to be worked out with Sky Mavis? How are we going to set up governance institutions, have voting systems, use merit, have credentials, and all those sorts of things. And it becomes obvious too that the contributors program needs to have some form of web presence so that people can see what's happening and have some ability to interact with it.
Right. So there's really a lot of details that need to be ironed out before we have like a fully fledged functional system of governance. Of course, as town builders, we can help set up some of the high level structures of governance, but I think most of the details will be decided by councils and the community. So that said, though, we as town builders want to help push through some of the more critical details, such as working with Sky Mavis to establish the rules around Axie IP. And of course, we want to establish a web presence where the community can find information about Axie governance specific information. And that's where we can organize all of our governance activities, such as voting and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got great plans for that. It's so exciting.
Maybe before we move on to talking about what we're going to do going forward, maybe we could give the community a sneak preview of the badge for season 0. What do you guys think?
I think it's a great idea.
Why don't we go to the next slide? So, community, we are working so hard to getting you this beautiful badge, which hopefully you can now see on your screen. I can tell you that the Sky Mavis team has successfully tested this, which is the first use of badges within the community, and it's going to be a much larger feature that's going to be within our ecosystem. They tested it effectively. We wanted to have it to you today. We wanted to do a couple of last-minute tests on our wallet addresses because once we mint these, they're real, they're permanent. But you will now have this as part of your digital identity on your wallet. And we hope to use badges like this as a way of being able to further enable our ability to engage in this process of governance. And so on one hand, it's beautiful. It's a nice piece of swag and a gift to you all, but it also is going to have function and utility going forward. The community or the town builders want to add anything before we move on to season 1 or phase 1?
I'll add one more thing about what we learned from this past season. Just on a personal note, I learned a lot from this town builders group, and I've been really impressed with their commitment to community. And so I haven't really seen anyone try to push personal agendas like you might expect from a political environment. So everyone genuinely wants to build a thoughtful, long-lasting system of governance. So I'm really optimistic and excited to see where we go from here.
Brett, do you want to take us forward in phase 1?
Yeah, so This next slide, dreaming forward, phase one. You know, I love the way we put this because we want to move forward, but we also want to do it in alignments with vision and things that we're hoping to do. So one of the things that I worked with the group to kind of help design is kind of a short, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, kind of a short cut phase map or roadmap that kind of gives an idea of what we're hoping to accomplish with phase one. We didn't want to put specific timeframes to this thing because, you know, as you look through this, and I'll kind of go through it quickly, we don't want to take up all sorts of time tonight. We really appreciate people being here. Obviously, you know, we're hugely committed to it. We're all volunteers as far as the Town Builders group, just trying to get this in place and functional in a place where it can really grow and has a chance to really take root and become something just amazing for Axie Infinity and for where we're headed. So the first step, and one thing about this roadmap is not all these things have to happen like in order. They can be in their own lanes to some extent, and actions can be taking place on various parts of this. Some of them pretty clearly do kind of rely on others as foundational steps to move forward. So first, you know, we need to enroll the next group of the contributors. So we need to get enrollment for participation in phase one. I think it's important that everybody understands that really what the contributors program is about governance. It is about establishing how we're going to handle the governance issues of Axie Infinity moving forward. I think everyone here sees that Axie Infinity has this cool chance to be its own digital nation, its own digital world. And this is what we're hoping are those foundational steps in order to allow that to develop based on community collaboration and consensus. So we want to expand the program, give it broader engagement and presence, and identify new contributors that will help us in this process together to create basically like a social contract that will work for everybody who wants to participate in Axie Infinity. So we're going to establish, and in the establishment, we want to help make sure we have these basic principles, these basic fundamentals understood. And we've been working really hard as the group of town builders to help bring these issues to the forefront of people's thoughts and concerns so that we can define kind of key ideas and roles such as citizenship and what it means to be a contributor and how that will play into the governance of Axie Infinity. And then we want to enact some of this stuff. So once we are able to get the contributors together to kind of come to consensus on some of these foundational principles, then we want to help define what Axie governance for phase one will look like. And part of that is establishing the web presence and introducing what we hope is going to be a great process dashboard to help us handle some of these, you know, technicalities that need to take place to identify someone as a contributor, to let them vote, to let them participate in both the responsibilities and the privileges that come with being a contributor. And so we want to empower the contributors program. And the way we saw this was that coming up with a proto council and also committees as needed would help us to really put this stuff into practice. And so we would transition kind of this kind of random proposal process into more of the council's purview. And then we want to work with Sky Mavis to grant the council some decision-making authority and help fund the council so that things can actually take place. And so moving forward from that, we will experiment. We'll see how that proto council goes, and we'll see how momentum is built around proposals. And we hope to improve the proposal process through that system. And then, you know, really excited to hopefully fund accepted contributor proposals through the ecosystem fund initially, as we prepare the governance in the community to be ready to access the treasury and really take those, what are right now, they're giant steps to really get the foundations in place, all the political institutions and everything necessary to unlock that great gift that we have of the treasury that can really just do amazing things for Axie Infinity and how it can be sustained into the future. So thanks for listening to this part, guys. This got me so excited. I'm going to kick it back to Syntax, who will talk about kind of our specific goals to accomplish this vision and mission in the roadmap here.
Thanks, Bernard. Maybe if you could advance to the next slide. So a little bit more detail. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. We have 5 major themes, major activities that we are going to do within this phase. The first is around building community understanding and alignment around how Axie governance will work. And that has a number of different dimensions to it. So asking people to contribute to foundational documents can't really happen until people agree and align on some of the basic concepts around community governance. And so we've been having some fun working with some of our colleagues in the community like Ryan and others to figure out like how we can create a process that introduces people to governance in a fun way. And I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Hopefully you guys will be excited with what we're cooking up. But in the process of going through some of this content, we want to talk about these ideas as a community. We don't just want to present information to you. We want to present it in a way that stimulates dialogue and consensus building. And so we think that as we do that over a period of time, it will start to become apparent to everyone within the community that underneath a lot of these concepts, we will be able to establish some what we're thinking of as foundational documents. And so some of those kinds of documents might look like this. So for example, how do we operate and make decisions together? Well, for those of you that are familiar with some governments or governance programs, there are these things called the Constitution. Well, why is it that we collaborate? Well, many digital nations or nations come up with ideas like declarations. And so we might need to create a declaration document. As many of you know, we have the Code of Conduct that talks about how we should behave. Well, right now that document exists out there, but we want to make that document something that is governed by the community. And so we'll think about ways in which we transfer the responsibility of this code of conduct to the contributors to oversee and to edit and manage. And then finally, like, what is it when someone participates and contributes, what do they get for doing that? What are their rights? And more importantly, what are their responsibilities? These are all things that we want to work on over the course of this next phase. If you could flip to the next slide. What we've also learned over the past few months is that teamwork makes the dream work. Group process trumps individual perspectives. And so ultimately, what we also understand is that people have certain superpowers and things that they're interested in, and we want to bring people with common interests to oversee different aspects of this community, and that happens through these councils or committees. So we want to start experimenting with going from individual perspectives to gravity wells where people are thinking about certain aspects of our digital nation. We want to start building out some first versions of those conventions, and we want to start finding some concrete tasks for them to oversee. There's lots of ideas that we have around that, but we'll share more about that going forward. Next slide. Number 3, we want to continue to build momentum around community proposals. As you all know, some proposals were put out with not necessarily a whole lot of context. We want to add a lot of structure. We want to give more guidance to the community around that. We want to encourage that. And we want to also experiment with funding more. But we think for now, we're going to learn more about how to effectively use the Treasury by leveraging resources that are outside of the Treasury. And we've talked with my colleagues at Sky Mavis about leveraging funds from like the Ecosystem Fund as a way to build some momentum around doing things successfully and gain experience around what works and what doesn't work. If you can go to the next slide. As Bernard pointed out, and I think Freak also mentioned as well, it's time for us to have a public web presence for community governance, and that needs to be a place on the internet where everyone can go and start reading about, like, what does the Axie governance program mean? Like, what are its conventions? What is its roadmap? Where is the educational content? Where can we go and talk about that? And we want to really work over this phase to have a place on the internet where you can go and learn more. And that also includes having a stronger social presence. what we learned is that you had to largely be on the contributor forum in order to understand what was going on. But we want to be a lot more provocative. We want to be a lot more communicative with the community. So we're going to put a lot of energy into a stronger social presence now that we have a better sense of what's going to happen over the course of this next phase. Next slide. Last but not least, we want to grow a much broader engagement and a community enthusiasm around everything we're doing around governance. So we want, obviously, to go from the pilot season to this end state where every community member who has made a meaningful contribution, however we as a community define that, are recognized as contributors. They're given voice. We want to build a lot more richer content and outreach so people know why they want to be a contributor. We want to look for incremental ways to empower contributors so that they feel like there's value and a reason to be a part of this process. And we also want to make it a little bit clearer, if you're interested and you think about this idea of being a town builder and that appeals to you, or you want to be an elector, or you want to get engaged in a way outside of being on these calls or being a part of the dialogue, if you want to spend more time and engage in a more deliberate way around being a part of the governance, we want to have ways in which you can raise your hand and volunteer. I think there's not only what we're doing, if we go to the next slide, but how we want to do that and what kind of environment we want to create. And I think the person that's probably best suited to talk about that is my colleague Z. Z, are you there? Do you want to take us through this next section?
Hey. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about our strategy for phase 1 and beyond. And that starts with empowering contributors. So first, we want to enhance the understanding of governance to contributors and just for Axie Infinity community members in general. And that starts with providing resources and tools to help you guys learn more about governance in the process. So, and the processes within governance. So governance can feel pretty overwhelming at times, and we think it's pretty important to, create resources and tools to help you all learn more about it in a way that is easier to digest. The next thing in empowerment that we want to do is we want to foster agency. So what that means is, you're a contributor or you're participating in governance. So what next? We want that kind of transition from just, being a regular community member and being a contributor or participating in governance to feel like that's an important step in your Axie life, so to speak. And, when you take that step, you should feel empowered to take action, ownership, and to create impactful solutions or to, allow you all to help decide the fate of things, whether that be proposals, whether that be feedback, formal votes in the future, etc. The last thing in empowerment that we want to do is we want to reward you all for your efforts. And that starts with rewarding you for both tangibly and intangibly. And so let me explain what that kind of means. So an intangible reward would be you all participating in a proposal and that proposal goes through. That's great. And I think that should be the end goal for, proposals and for, most of governance. It's just kind of figuring out problems, collectively agreeing or disagreeing and deciding, the outcome. But another important part of that is I think tangible rewards are an important way to kind of both drive engagement and for you all to feel like you were rewarded for that effort. And so, that could be, we presented the season 0 badge. That could be an example of a tangible reward. And we want to kind of, we want to lean into that and provide more badges, maybe achievements in the future in governance. The next thing is enjoyment. So one thing that traditional governance programs or projects tend to get wrong is the enjoyment factor. There's a lot of governance programs out there that they're leaning into the empowerment side, which is great, but a lot of governance programs are not necessarily enjoyable or fun. And so we really want to make this process enjoyable. We want to make it fun. At the end of the day, Axie Infinity is a game, and you all should feel like you all are having fun being a contributor or a member in this process. So we want to adopt game-like structures to make governance more fun and interactive. And on the flip side, we hope that games, within the Axie Infinity universe, kind of adopt some of our structures as well. So an example of this is we have the season 0 badge, or we have achievements. We would like to work with other games to potentially have that be a sticker, or something that you can present within the game. Imagine if you had a I voted sticker or something that you could present in Origins. We think that would be something that could combine the the agency part with the fun factor. And another part of enjoyment is we want to start introducing quests to encourage interaction with governance tasks. So right now we're working with Moku, and hopefully we'll have something to present in the coming weeks with Moku and quests there. But we're kind of starting with that, and we're really excited with some potential quests that we can present there for you all. So that way, you all can have fun kind of diving into this process of, learning more about governance in terms of educational content, badges, etc. We really want to lean into that. The last part of enjoyment is vertical progression and credentials. So kind of over a long-term vision here, we want to create systems to reward regular participation and goal achievement, resulting in progression. And participation can help build credentials. So think of it kind of like this. Season 0 was maybe the first part of this vertical progression or this journey. And so people should feel like they're having a journey not only within the game, but also within their governance and their credentials. We think it's important to reward people for being a part of, Season 0, Phase 1, all of these quests that we are, planning on presenting to you guys. And we want that to kind of culminate in a sense of vertical progression, or a sense of, you guys feel like, hey, I am doing all of these things, and I almost have like this digital resume. So yeah, it kind of wraps up empowering contributors and gamifying governance.
Thanks a lot, Z. I think we are at the end of our presentation, and we are now about ready to move into our Q&A. As hopefully many of you know, we encouraged you all to submit some questions. We felt like it would be useful to maybe start by answering some of those questions, and also give you all a time to queue up your question and answers, because we want to move from a few that we have prepared for you into an open session. Get into the first question. So it is an incredibly common question, and it makes sense as to why a number of people would ask it, and they ask it in different ways. For example, why doesn't Origins have X feature? Or why don't Mystic Axies have X utility? Or when will there be SLP and Y product? Or why doesn't X product have Y function? And the answer to all of them from the town builder's perspective is similar. And I encourage my colleagues to also step in here. The point behind all of this work that we're doing is to build momentum around community governance and how it's structured. We are town builders. This is the community governance process. We're not the right group at this point to field those kinds of questions, but hopefully, as you all can see, we'd like to help create the structures to help making getting answers to those questions better over time. That is an incremental process. It's a continually decentralized process. I think we're making a lot of progress with that, but the products are different than the work that we're doing to build out the structure of governance. Any of my colleagues want to add any color there before we go to the next question? Great. Well, let's go ahead and move to the next question, question 2. And I definitely want the input of my colleagues on this one. What surprised the town builders around the pilot season of the contributors program? I might kick it off and say, I was actually surprised in a really pleasant way by the various moments along this pilot season where the contributor group stepped in and tried to support establishing a process. Some of you might or might not be aware of this, but one of our community members, JJ, was one of the first to take some time and on the forum structure a proposal for developing the flag. And it was that effort that helped us start thinking about preparing for doing proposals and helping us recognize that the community was ready to start submitting those. In addition, the whole idea of building a forum came from the contributors. So there were multiple moments along the way where we felt like, at least I felt like, the contributors really contributed to the process of building out structure and process. But I wonder if any of my colleagues have any other color they'd like to share.
Sure, I'll the thing that jumps out at me is how much more important consensus is than voting. And this is something that I took away from the past season, and I hope that that if there's anything that I can teach you guys, it's consensus is infinitely more important than voting, and voting should be only used as an absolute last resort.
I think I'll add to what Odin said there. I was surprised at times how challenging, and I don't know why this surprised me, but it did surprise me how challenging it was to encourage enough participation to feel like we were headed toward consensus. And that's one of the things that I think we're taking as a very important lesson moving into phase one, are some of the things Z talked about and some of the other things we've alluded to of the ways to get people to just have fun and be excited to participate, and also understand the benefits of participating, so that we can drive consensus quicker and have a more clear level of consensus about issues.
Any other comments from my colleagues? We can go on to the next question. This was another fairly common question. There were a number of proposals that were made in the contributors forum, but they weren't all accepted. For example, the Mystic staking proposal. Why was that? Well, I might start by saying that I think, when we built the forum, we wanted to start experimenting with things like proposal submission. We wanted to learn about what we needed as a community to be successful with the idea of something like proposals at scale. And I think we learned a lot from that process, end to end. And I think we learned a ton about what we can do to take forward in subsequent phases. If I think about proposals like the Mystic staking one, I think all of us as town builders felt like it had incredibly good rationale from our perspective. But we also recognize that we're early in this process, and we're not really at a stage where we could do anything meaningful with a proposal like that from an oversight or even a resourcing perspective. I think we all agree that decentralization is something that's ongoing. And of course, the whole goal of all of this is to reach a place where a really well-written and well-considered proposal like the Mystic staking proposal can actually be genuinely considered and reviewed as a community. That is the goal. I think that from my personal perspective, I don't want people to feel disenchanted because we weren't able to immediately accept a proposal like that or do anything about it. And I don't want people to leave that experience feeling like that's not the goal. It is in fact the goal, but we have to have some things in place. I'm wondering if my colleagues have anything they want to add to that.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think we're trying to stay in the spirit in line with the spirit of progressive decentralization. And so there were a lot of things that season 0 just could not cover in that regard. We're still at the very, very beginning of this kind of decentralization process. And I think we're still experimenting with some structures that we think can provide us a way to efficiently decentralize in the spirit of progressive decentralization. And so that was kind of my take on the Mystic staking proposal. I think it was it needed to happen as a test and as a learning experience for us. But like I said, I think we're still we're still trying to get there to where we can handle proposals like that for reasons that Syntax kind of had already explained.
Any other color commentary? Okay.
Well, Syntax, I think we're going to talk more about the roles of the different groups that are involved in this governance creation process and in phase one. And the role of the town builders, I guess, just to be clear, is not for us to like take charge over everything. We're here to assist in creating like the systems and institutions that will be able to make those sorts of decisions in like repeatable, understandable, practical ways moving forward that hopefully prohibit really bad decisions from being made, or people being able to take advantage of systems that they can due to their own self-interest or their own selfish desires. So it's a very important role that we're taking on as the town builders. And I struggled with this one, and I specifically wanted to push this one forward, as everybody in the town builders knows. But ultimately, the town builders made the right call. We aren't in charge like that, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Bernard.
Yeah, I think the takeaway is we personally, individually, might agree with the proposal, but it simply wasn't our place. That's the very short version.
Maybe we move forward to the next question. So another common question: what is the current thinking around transferring responsibility of the community treasury over to the community? I might start by making a couple of comments. One, first and foremost, the treasury belongs to the community. It belongs to all of us. And so what follows from that is that we all have a collective responsibility to create a process for decision-making that gives all of us an opportunity to engage, to influence, and to make decisions around the treasury. And I think that now more than ever, the town builders and other members of the community have visibility into what the key steps of that really are. And from my vantage point, those steps are to, first and foremost, align expectations of the community around the treasury, what it's to be used for, what are its goals, to start developing, once we have that alignment, a first iteration of a decision-making process, which hopefully you're hearing shades of in what we're thinking about doing for phase one. Then we need to actually take that decision-making process and test it. But we should probably test it not using the resources of the treasury, but some other sort of resources outside of the treasury. And we've talked about, for example, the ecosystem fund, and there's probably some others that we can talk about as well. But we want to practically test that process using resources that are not the treasury. Then we want to learn from that. We want to revise, we want to retest, and then we want to reach a point where we want to open that treasury for community use when the community, when Sky Mavis, when we all agree that we have a good process, and we'll know it when we see it. It's really hard from my vantage point to say that will take 6 months or that will take 12 months. I think it's difficult to place a timeline on something that has to be iterative, but I think we all feel a sense of urgency to want to make that happen as quickly as possible. And I think from my vantage point, this next phase of this process, it focuses on the first couple of steps that I've laid out, but I'd be curious to hear whether the other town builders had anything they want to add there.
The community is incredibly diverse across the world, really. And so coming to consensus on something like this that crosses boundaries, crosses nations, crosses the entire world is going to be just such fun, exciting work. It's going to be hard, disappointing work at times. And there are so many different people with so many different ideas of what they want. That actually probably lends itself to us designing a system that is extremely robust and can be very, very resilient. In those ways, I'm just super excited about that. Although it's probably not going to be fast, and it's probably going to be very challenging.
Any other comments before we move on to the final question?
Yeah, I just want to say that I hope that we can correctly communicate progressive decentralization, for, on our vision for Axie Infinity, because, I think it's going to roll out like that. It's going to roll out progressively. And, even I expect that even if the treasury, were to unlock it, it's probably not going to like be, fully unlocked, right, right at that point. We kind of want to ease our way into it because I think we all acknowledge that it's a very, very important part of our ecosystem.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what the previous guys said. This probably is going to take a while, but if you as contributors feel like we should be moving faster, I encourage everyone to post their ideas in the forums and basically help us figure out how to make this happen faster. So we really want your engagement and we want to do this with you guys.
Finally, the last question. Why has this initiative identified quote unquote contributors and what will their role in governance be going forward? I think I saw a related question in the chat while I was looking at the chat. And I think what I would say personally, and I would love input from the rest of the town builders, but our experience is that within a community, people participate for any number of reasons. And I think that's especially the case with a very large, heterogeneous, diverse community like Axie. Some people are more engaged than others. I think in my experience and in our experience, people who are more in the weeds, they better understand how to move something like Axie going forward. And so we've been working to understand what it means for community members to contribute and to declare them as such, because we think those individuals are best suited to build out the Axie governance. AXS, as we've said multiple times, and hopefully it continues to be clear, is the foundation of voting within our community, and it will have a role in governance. But we want to also look at the relationship of people who hold AXS to the ways in which they contribute, recognizing that it's really important to enhance and encourage the voices of those who contribute to have voice. So I think what we've talked a lot about things like an Axie score, and there's a lot of discovery that needs to go along with that. But we think that the first phase of that is to understand the difference between a typical citizen of our community and a contributor, those that are going out of their way to add value to the community and are making contributions. Town builders, anything you want to add to that? Okay, Zach, I think we are now at our time for open Q&A, and I haven't had a chance to look yet at the questions, but I think you've queued me up to look at what some of those questions are. And I hope it would be okay if I can start calling upon some people, and maybe I can ask. I'm looking here. AI Labs. I'm wondering if we can give you an opportunity to speak up. Or
Ooh-wee, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me up. I appreciate it. Seeing all the progress you guys have made is really exciting. Sometimes in chat, it's moving kind of slow in the contributors, so it's good to see you guys are doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And I was trying to write down as many questions as I have, so I'm gonna try to just ask the ones that are most poignant, so I don't take up too much time. But I was just wondering more about like what vision you guys have for when you think we'll be ready. Like if there's any specific metrics that we should be looking for, and also what shortcomings we have now that make you guys think that we aren't mature enough to have this governance implemented.
I think I've been talking a lot. Do any of my colleagues, my town builders, want to start responding here?
I talk a lot, but I'll jump into this one. For me, it's that we have to see something that is like well designed, intelligently designed. That's something that the community knows and understands, has an expectation about how it's going to be implemented. In my mind, I think of a council system. And it's going to be, though, up to the contributor program to gain consensus around this. But I think that it needs to be something that the community can see transparently, that they can understand how that process takes place, that they can participate in, that they have some sort of vote or say, kind of like maybe, you know, like a form of representative democracy or something like that, that empowers people who can then make decisions. That's just my thoughts, and those are just my ideas, but I think it's going to take a lot of time and effort with the contributors to kind of make up their answers to that question themselves. I mean, honestly, and then build consensus around you know, what they think makes the most sense. I mean, obviously it doesn't make sense right now, where we don't really even have a good way to have a dashboard to have people vote, for example. There are lots of components like Axie score and various different things that should be input. And so how to take all those inputs, like credentials, potential badges, amounts of access, you know, historical participation in the community, all those sorts of things probably have some role to play, right, in how we make a final decision as to governing bodies and so forth. I don't know, it all just gets me very excited. So I can talk and talk, but I hope that that gives you some insight, at least to the way I'm seeing it, the way I'm envisioning it. And I think that the town builders see it this way too.
Yeah, so I think Berner has had a lot of ideas, great ideas. As town builders, we've seen a lot of his work and his ideas. So a lot of what we do as town builders is kind of based on some of his thoughts. But just to push things along a little bit, I think what we want to have happen is we want to have some kind of community governance, right? So Berner mentioned councils, something like that. So how do we get there? And who gets to be a part of that? Does Sky Mavis get to be a part of that, for example? And how do we get their participation? Things like that. And what kind of processes need to be in place in order to access funds? And there's a lot of details that need to be worked out that hopefully the community will help build with us. Obviously, we don't know all the answers right at this point, and this is something we really hope to build going forward. And it's going to be a gradual process, right? So first we'll start with maybe establishing councils or figuring out how to establish that, and then the councils themselves will figure out their own processes and rules, and figure out what kind of tasks that they are empowered to execute, that kind of thing. So as we move along, some of this stuff will just be figured out by the community.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the answer. I had a follow-up question, and Bernard like inadvertently kind of like touched on it, and he's getting me pretty hyped. But I really wanted to ask and see about this Axie score. If you guys have ideas about it, what it's gonna be looking like, you know, like how it's gonna affect it, and it's just exciting to see that you guys are still thinking about it, at least Bernard.
Do you
Yeah, we
want
talk about it a lot.
Yeah, go ahead, Odin.
We talk about the score a lot. It is by far and away the most contentious topic, because of just how insanely complex it is. We have a meeting with somebody from Sky Mavis coming up to tie into another system. Maybe we'll see how that goes. But yeah, like we're trying to build a bunch of strawmans and then give them to the community and say, what do you think of this? Do you want to completely like start over, or do you want to work with like this model? We have some ideas. But yeah, Axie score is very different, very, very difficult. Just because of it, when you say Axie score, you're basically trying to account for every single action that every single person is taking to contribute to Axie, and quantifying that is A, very hard, and B, if you do it wrong, people get very angry very fast. So we have ideas. We will give them to the community in time. And yeah, don't get too mad at the initial numbers, okay? Like it's a straw man. It's not a final product, okay?
Sounds good, dude.
AI Labs, the one thing that I would maybe add is that if you look across all of the governance initiatives in Web3, one of the common things that plagues unsuccessful initiatives are something called plutocratic issues, which in other words is people owning large amounts of tokens and dominating votes, when in many cases some of the stakeholders that own those tokens don't necessarily understand the things in which they're voting for and the long-term implications of them. And I think what we want to find is the balance between encouraging people to hold the tokens to influence decisions, and to also ensure that those same people are engaged in the process of understanding the context of why some of those decisions have long-term positive impacts in growing the ecosystem. The goal is to help make Axie this infinitely growing ecosystem. And we have a business model, so air quotes, through this treasury that we can sustain ourselves for a very long time. But in order to do that, we need to be thoughtful. And those that understand the community and are engaged in it on a daily basis are a really important input. And so the Axie score, at least from my perspective, reflects a way in which we can honor those who are close to the process of the community alongside the AXS token. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes perfect sense. Well, one of the things I'm thinking about just hearing all this is obviously it's contentious, and deciding from my authoritative position about how we would do this seems like something that would have many pitfalls, and that, you know, this could potentially be a proposal that we work on within the contributor program. So it's something that we all agree on. So we would, you know, it would it would basically serve both purposes as far as understanding like how to implement governance and taking pressure off of the authoritative positions as well.
Well, thanks for your questions. We've got a number of others. If you don't mind, AI Labs, we're going to move to a couple of other people, if that's okay.
Sure. Thanks for everything.
Great, thanks. It looks like there's so many questions here. I wanted to maybe give the town builders a way to answer. Well, the anonymous one has disappeared. So I'm going to go ahead and call Best up. Best has asked a question around getting involved in building infrastructure. Best, do you want to take the floor? Is Best still here? Oh, yep, there he
guys,
is.
can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Thank you very much for inviting me up. And first of all, thank you so much to all of you guys for putting this together, for the amount of work that's gone into it. The progress from last time is really, really evident. The structure is amazing. The participation is amazing. So just thank you on behalf of everyone. Yeah, I mean, this feels like a massive call to arms. It's like 3 a.m. in the UK here, so I'm really sorry if I sound a bit croaky, but I'm buzzing with excitement from this. And I'm sure lots of other people really want to get involved in however I can help to take this forward. Yeah, how like, other than just kind of being here and DMing you guys afterwards, like, is there a more official, formal way that we should be sort of trying to propose things? Should I be going through the Discord forums, or, you know, what's the best way to engage?
Town builders, do you want to respond? You want me to take a first crack?
Yeah, go Syntax.
Yeah, I guess the first thing I would say to you is I think that underneath there are probably lots of different versions of how I would respond. The first thing I would say is that season 0 was really kind of like a preparation season. And I hope it became very clear, Best, that as we go into this next phase, we have a very clear idea of a collection of tasks that we want to complete. And we actually have even built out a project plan for that. Inside that, there are a number of ways for people like yourself to engage. So for example, I happen to know, as Best at Axie.tech and Tribally, that you all like to build out infrastructure. And as we've pointed out, there is a web presence that we need to build as part of that. One of the things that the Sky Mavis team has said to us is, well, what does it need to look like? What does it consist of? And I think the town builder response to that would be, we're not quite sure yet. We need to prototype some things. We need to experiment with some things. And so we imagine that in this phase, we could really benefit from people like yourself, helping us build out some of that infrastructure, learning what works and what doesn't work, and allowing the community to engage in that process. And so I think we are going to do a much better job of expressing to the contributors what it is we want help with. And we want to start empowering people to engage in that. And in some cases, if that requires resources, then we want to have a conversation around that. But we want to start creating more opportunities for people to do more than watch. But I'm sure that my other town builders have some other thoughts they might want to add.
Yeah, I'll just say a good example is kind of like our recent talks with Akil and Moku. It's like, we found they had released Moku here recently, and the whole Genkai thing was great. And we all as town builders looked at that and was like, hey, like this is a great way we can start plugging in like some governance tasks and kind of, gamifying governance as well. And so, like I think it starts with kind of being presented with some tools or being presented with some ideas. But also, like as Syntax alluded to, kind of collectively figuring out between ourselves, what are we going to need in the future past, phase 1 going into phase 2, phase 3. And so we want to connect with all of you. We want to see what you all are building, see what you all, potentially have to offer. And in this case, infrastructure. And yeah, like we want to start kind of implementing, experimenting with things that are going to help kind of drive our overall goals.
Any other color from our town builders?
Yeah, I think as town builders, we can also help initiate some of these conversations. So, of course, best you can contact us in the contributor Discord channels or the forums. But I think as town builders, we can also do our part by creating focused discussion topics around some of these things. For example, the web presence, right? So I think as we move forward in this phase 1, there's probably a lot of activities where we do want community feedback. So I think we should take it upon ourselves as town builders also to basically facilitate some of these conversations.
There's this weird human instinct that a group has that when they are empowered or are responsible for doing something, they tend to look internally for how to accomplish it. And I think what we all as town builders need to continue working on is figuring out how to communicate what needs to happen in a way that's more transparent and engaging. And so not only do we encourage people like yourself, Bess, to push us, but we have to also do work to make it clear, like where there are opportunities, not necessarily expecting that people are always going to answer it, but we've got to start somewhere. And I think exposing what needs to happen to people allows people like you to raise your hand and say, I want to help. So I think it goes both ways, and we have to kind of fight our natural instincts in that regard.
Thank you so much for all of those answers. Yeah. And, I am sure I'm not going to be the only community builder that's going to want to get involved. There's so much talent within our community. And I think if this process can sort of harness that and bring people together and start to sort of, bring all of the power from each of the individual organizations and each of the talented individuals together, I think, we're onto a real winner. So thank you all again.
Thanks, Best. We're going to maybe move on to another question or two. We're in an hour 20. I'm wondering, town builders, do we have an opportunity maybe for one more question before we close? What do you all think?
I have time.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
let's do it.
I could keep going. I just want to make sure my colleagues aren't getting killed here. Yeah, I'll ask one more here. I'm wondering if Elmay's PH wants to come up to the stage, and if not, I'm happy to answer or ask your question for you. We'll give Elmay's a chance to come up. Oh, you're at work. So how about I answer your question for you, my friend? And it was a good one. How can I be a contributor? Is there something like a training program for this? Does anyone want to answer that from the town builder team?
I'll dig into the technicalities of it, and then others can say other things. So one of the amazing slides that we had up was the list of the electors. The electors are people that, gosh, the last comments about like what it takes for all of this stuff to happen. It's so important that there be a lot of minds and a lot of hands and a lot of people involved. I was just typing in chat, and I'll just say it instead, that without the secretariat team, we would probably be another 3 months before we'd be able to even have this town hall, because of how much of a load it takes off of the town builders to move from conceptualization, visualizing, into action and activity. And those things help so very much. And so the elector group is another group that is just profoundly important to this process. And they've been empowered specifically to design the credential system, in who qualifies to be a contributor, what it takes in order to do that, and then go through the process of making sure and vetting all of the people who've applied for the contributor program. So amazingly, we have this electors group that is assisting us with that process, and letting us kind of continue to think about things conceptually and kind of pushing forward the big pictures of what governance and what we'd like to see.
Any other thoughts from the town builders? I mean, the bottom line is, from my perspective, and Odin, I want you to speak up here, but the pure answer is the way that you become a contributor is by continuing to do what you do to add value, and just raise your hand, and when the application window opens, talk to us about what you've done, and voila. Community members will review your application and will determine that you're a contributor. You were born to do this if you've been working within the community and have found ways to add value. I hope I didn't steal your thunder, Odin.
No, not at all. There are a few obvious things that make you a contributor. If you make content, if you make artwork, if you build tools, if you are a person who educates other people in any shape, way, or form, you are easily a contributor. Then you get into the more nebulous stuff, like, do asset owners are they contributors just by dint of them? But by them holding assets, are they worthy of the contributor tag? And that is for the electors to decide the exact criteria on. We gave them, as town builders, we gave them a straw man. We said, look, this is a vague idea of what we have, and it's up to them to refine that. And if they want to wipe their ass with it and start with a fresh slate, then power to them. But at the end of the day, the goal is to have the community select the community, and we want this as much as possible to be community driven, because if it's just forced upon people, then it may as well be a dictatorship, right?
Thanks, Odin. I might do a couple of rapid fires before we move into the next steps in closing, if that's okay with the town builders. Are there any training programs intended for the community to be more prepared? Yes. When we enter into phase 1, we will be sharing a whole number of modules. I wouldn't necessarily call them training modules, but we would call them maybe peer learning modules, where we try to find fun ways to talk about some of the concepts of governance. And every week or so, we want to get together with the community, for those that are interested, talk about those, what people thought about them, what they liked about them, what they didn't like about them, what their own opinions are around them. And we want to just, again, start to build consensus with those that are interested in being a part of defining what governance looks like. Let me pick another one here. How will we avoid the governance system's vulnerability to voters with massive influence acting in self-interest? I think we have tried to attack that in various ways. But I think what I would say is, we believe that ultimately balancing and trying to find a model that takes into account a person's level of engagement with the community alongside their token holding, we believe plays an important role in that. But there's a lot of experimentation that we need to do. I think there's a lot of questions here, and I don't know if we're going to be able to get to them all, but I think maybe as town builders, we can commit to accumulating all of these and maybe making a post on the contributors portion of the Discord, and maybe we can all take a little bit of time thrown in. Town builders, do you feel comfortable with that? We can maybe move on to next steps.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I think that's good. Also, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of phase one. So please keep your excitement, keep your interest, keep your questions. That's really what we're probing with phase one is how we're going to design that and how we're going to answer some of these questions.
Well, I think we want to move to giving you all some more information. And I think that starts with talking a little bit about our next phase. So how to participate in phase one. So if you move on to the next slide, I think we're all excited to let you all know that we are going to open the phase one process on a week from now, August 28th. We hope to have a better process, something that takes into account all of the ways in which you might engage with us, including your wallet, including your social media, so that it's a little bit easier to reach you. In addition, we are going to, announce that in various different forms. So the electors are very busy kind of working through that process and getting ready for you. And so please stay tuned. There's a lot more that's coming. But hopefully you will reach out to your colleagues within the community. You'll make sure that if they're not here, that they're aware of this. We're going to experiment with some ways of making it exciting and maybe make that process of identifying contributors something that is rolling, but the electors are working through that. So it looks like we are rounding to a close. And before we close, I noticed that our friend and colleague Jiho is in the audience, and I wondered if you, sir, had anything that you wanted to say to the community and to this process. Maybe if we could invite him up. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, Jeff.
Hey, you guys can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can.
Loud, clear.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm super excited to be here today, and I didn't want to say too much, because this is ultimately a process that needs to come from the community, and what I can say is that I've sat in on many of the meetings with the town builders, and the dedication and resilience that they've shown has been really special to watch. And I think that, this is something that's never been done before. This is something without a playbook. But so it will take iteration, right? And there are going to be days, weeks, months where we may feel lost, right? We may not know exactly what the next step is on the illuminated path. But I think the inspiration that's driving us forward here is to create a game, the likes of which the world has never seen. A system which the world has never seen, and I think it promises to fulfill a lot of the dreams and imaginings that we've always felt as gamers. I've always felt that games could be about way more than gaming, and I think that that's at the core of what this governance process is about, is the striving to be way more than a game, to be something that's more akin to a nation, right? And I think that is the unifying message, and yeah, I'm really excited about the progress so far. I would also say, I think it's really come together in the last 1 or 2 months, where I think there was, I think at the beginning, what I observed was, I think the town builders were their own harshest critics, and they realized quickly that it was really up to them to ask for the changes and the processes in order to be more efficient. So I've really seen them come together as a group. I'm very proud of the progress that we've made so far. There's still a really long journey. So, but yeah, I do think that stuff like this is what makes Axie special. This is the type of things that you won't see in a traditional game, in a normie game or a game for muggles. And it is, I think, one of the things that sets us apart and makes what we're doing here potentially something that could change history. I would contend that we have already changed history together, but I think this lays the foundation for even further breakthroughs and advancements. So yeah, sending love to everybody. Thank you for attending. I know that this, I think that governance can be abstract. It can be, hard to understand, but I think everyone here, the 175, I think we've had, over 300 people in attendance, everyone that's in Project T as well gathered. Right, let's form together here on this Discord stage, the people who have attended today. Let's spread the word, right? Let's tell the people who may be skeptical of governance that there is something really interesting here and that it is worth paying attention to. And yeah, I'm also really excited about the badge, and more on that to come.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm obviously very hyped. I think probably all the town builders are as well. We have over 200 people, and I know that we've had well over 300 people come in and out at various points along the way. Pretty incredible for an early stage of governance. Shows a lot of the interest that's in place. I'm wondering, town builders, before we do our closeout, any final words from you all?
This has been said before already, but I just want to again thank Creator. I think he's contributed tons to the progress that we made as a town builder organization. The organization and the ownership of a lot of the administrative tasks have been super valuable. So thanks again, Zach.
Thanks, Freak.
You're gonna hate this one, Syntax, but I gotta thank you as well. So for the people who have no idea about the town builders, Syntax selected the original 5, and then at some point we said you should actually be one of us, and we voted him in, and he's been an incredible bridge between us as town builders and Sky Mavis. So a huge thank you to you for everything you've done for this process. It's been incredible working with you. Thank you.
That's very kind. Any other comments, Bernard?
Yeah, just real quickly, I just hope that everyone can really channel their excitement. I see a lot of excitement in chat, and I governance, like Jiho said, is not always the most exciting topic to rally around. So I hope that we can continue to have excitement and continue to have participation and really see forward progress, even when there are going to be hard times. There's no question about it. And I feel confident that the town builders are committed to it. The electors are committed. The team, I'm just get more and more excited to hear about the ways in which they're supporting us and allowing for collaboration. This is just the beginning, and I feel like phase 1 really is the beginning. We tried out stuff, we experimented in phase 0, but this is really where the rubber hits the road.
Okay. Well, I might just maybe close with a couple of thanks and some pointers to folks. And so if we could go to the next slide. Are you interested, if you've been listening on this conversation and you thought to yourself, man, I want to build this nation out. I want to be involved in the governance process. Being a town builder sounds like something I'd be interested in. I think we'd like to hear from you. Hopefully within the community, these various people. And if you feel comfortable reaching out to one of us, please do so. Let us know your interest. We'll certainly have a conversation around that. Next slide. Are you interested about the contributor election process? Are you wanting to ask questions about how it works, how it should be better next time, or how you can get involved? Well, you see all of these community members are now contributor electors, and they will be going through and overseeing that process going forward, everything from defining what it means to be a contributor to overseeing that process. And so please feel free to reach out to them. The last slide. I think Freak started getting at this, but I wanted to go out of my way on behalf of all of the contributor electors to thank each and every person who has been working behind the scenes towards supporting this effort. There are so many people that deserve appreciation and thanks. People like Godfather, people like Chica, people like Coco Bear, Ryan, Axie Fax, Shade, so many people, Tyon, people have made lots and lots of contributions over the course of this period of time. We imagine that that group is only going to grow, but thank you, thank you, thank you. And especially thank you to our friend Zach Creator for all of the hard work toward putting this together. It's been a lot of fun to work with you all, and looking forward to engaging you all further. Thanks for making an hour and a half of time, actually over an hour and a half, to talk through this, to ask good questions. We promise that we'll answer the ones that we haven't been able to answer. Any closing thoughts, team, before we end this conversation today?
Axie hard.
Well said. I think we're going to close up today and tonight. So thank you everyone for participating. This gave me a lot of new energy to continue pushing hard on this stuff. It's very exciting. Looking forward to working with you all. Talk soon. Have a great evening, morning, afternoon. Take care, everyone.